Hello and welcome to this screencast, one of the first that I'm going to be making for you on some notes. This one is on the 1920s and specifically business. So I've given you this PowerPoint handout in class, and we're going to take a look at some of the main objectives as well as some of the notes. So we're going to start with the automobile industry, and the thing we're going to look at is the impact of the automobile on America's economy and culture. So if we look at the impact on the economy, your textbook in the beginning of page 628 in chapter 20, section 3, begins to take a look at the Model T. So in 1927, the last Model T actually rolled off the assembly line. That was number 15,077,033. That's 15 million Model Ts. Now clearly that has an economic impact on the country in a couple different ways. One, it made the Ford Motor Company extremely profitable. And profitable because all of those 15 million Model Ts were exactly alike. They were the same color, they were the same shape, same size, and the second thing is that the Model T began to become more affordable. And it should be noted, as your book points out, that the automobile itself becomes the backbone of the American economy and remains that way until the 70s. And that means that Americans made a lot of cars and bought a lot of cars. And of course today, with foreign competition, Americans get their cars from different places. So we're going to take a look here at Model Ts, and then I have a short video that I wanted to show you. So if we take a look at a Model T, this is one picture from a Model T museum in which there's a nice shiny polished view. This is what it looks like to, I suppose, be run over by a Model T. If we wanted to take a look at the interior, we could right over here. This is the only rear view mirror on the left side, the steering wheel, and of course the horn, which you could squeeze to make a sound. So if we take a look at some of the other parts, Model Ts had very, very light suspension. There was no outside casing of the car. If you looked at a Model T from the front, this is what you would see. Apparently there's a little happy man over here, but no protection, and except for keeping the bugs off of your eyes, very little in the rain, of course. Off your head, there is almost no protection in the Model T. However, that would become an issue later on. And by the way, if you don't like these headlights, notice there are oil lamps that you could put on in front of the car itself. So there are a lot of details of the engine, but I thought I would take some time to give you an idea about how a Model T works. So over here, going in reverse, this is Ed Hebb. Ed Hebb is an expert on the Model T. So he's going to actually show us just a little segment here about the Model T itself, and here we go.
Require some maintenance. Before we take this car out on the road, I have a little checklist that I run through. We'll check and make sure that the gas is going to flow from the gas tank into the carburetor. And we have a fuel switch here, which is now off. We'll turn it to on. And then the next step is to check that there is gasoline in the tank. The gas tank being under the seat, we raise the seat cushion, open the filler on the tank, and use a dipstick to see how much gas is in there. Well, right now it shows there's 7 gallons in the tank, so that'll take us quite a few, well over 100 miles.
Okay, that looks incredibly unsafe. So the Model T itself, Ed goes through a couple other of the checklist items. He shows you how to hand crank the Model T here, and then he checks the tire pressure and then gets in.
simple. After all, millions of people learn to drive on a Model T, and I'll just point those out. The steering wheel, at least it acts the same as a modern wheel. You turn it to the right, the car goes to the right, to the left, so forth. These two levers that are under the steering wheel, however, are different. This one on the left is the spark advance, retard in that position, advance all the way down. On the other side, we have the hand throttle. The Model T has no accelerator on the floor. Instead, the engine speed is controlled by this hand throttle. As you move it down, the engine goes faster and faster. And on the floor of the Model T are three pedals which stick out. This car has only 2 speeds forward. To get the low speed, you step on the left-hand pedal, push it all the way down, and the car moves forward in low gear. To get high speed, you release the handbrake and the left pedal, and then you're in high speed.
Okay, now we know how to get into the high speed of a Model T. And by the way, having the throttle on the steering column is something that many modern cars are actually going back to, and eliminating the idea of a floor model. And especially for people with disabilities, that model still makes sense today. So the impact that the automobile had on culture is the second part of the question that we're going to take a look at. And that is something that your book talks about too. It talks about the impact of Route 66, which there's a map of down here, but also things that are important, like adding a driveway to your house, or having motels, or shopping centers to go to, or traffic signals. These are all things that shifted our culture, and many Americans became used to that. And your book includes, as I said, Route 66. I actually traveled on some of this when I was in the not in the 1920s, when I actually was in my 20s. And it's pretty cool. You guys should get out there if you get a chance. So we know the economic impact, we know the cultural impact. Let's take a look at the notes. Bring us back here. So the economic impact of the airplane is the second topic. Your book goes over this a little bit. Down here in the young airplane industry, airplanes were invented in 1903, but by the 1920s, people were beginning to take a look at them for doing a couple other things like weather forecasting, carrying the mail, and travel, which began to make more sense because airplanes could travel faster than ships on the ocean. And that's how most people actually got from continent to continent. Airplanes would also be able to travel faster in some cases than railroads and trains. So the economic impact on that on transportation is huge. The third thing we're going to take a look at here is advertising. Now, your book goes on to mention that advertising is kind of an important detail in the growth of American businesses, especially as more people began to get electrical items in their homes. Okay? Now, if we zoom back here and take a look at the introduction, we see that, the 1920s seemed like a pretty good time. From 1920 to 1929, America had 40% of the world's wealth. That's a little under half of all of the wealth in the world. And for average people per year, their income rose about 35%. That's not so bad. In fact, I think a lot of people would like to see that kind of thing today. So the beginning of the 1920s, they're making about $522 a year, and by the end of the 1920s, making about $705 a year. And of course, things cost differently back then. If you look at like the differences in getting a washboard, for instance, that's only $5, but an electric washing machine costs $150. So notice the price goes up, but the amount of labor that is required to do these things goes down. Okay, and that has a big impact on American life, and so does the impact of advertising. Your book gives you an example of like many businesses that decided to reach out in magazines or billboards or on the radio in order to influence people. So this is true of Listerine, as your book gives you an example here, but it's also true of some other um, advertisements as well. And this is one here for light bulbs. Okay, clearly you can see how much better that is. And of course, the important point, it costs less. Okay, I have here a website that has um, many different ads from all over American history, and these are home appliances. We have here an advertisement for a refrigerator. The food he eats is the man he'll be. Clearly, if you want men, you want him to eat food out of a all steel refrigerator. And GE, which of course was an electric company at the time, said that more than 350,000 homes are already enjoying this. So of course you want to go along with them. And let's take a look at a couple other ads just very quickly. Maybe we'll take a look at some food ads from the 1920s and perhaps some Campbell soup. Of course, everybody knows everybody needs soup. So the Campbell's vegetable soup is 12 cents a can. And there you go. Lunch, dinner, supper. The difference between dinner and supper, you figure it out. Um, and let's see, do we want pork and beans? No, maybe some cereal. Okay, so if we're looking at a cereal advertisement here, something she has that many women lack, a magic greater than beauty itself. It sounds poetic and romantic, and apparently these people assume so because it has something to do with eating Post's bran flakes. And apparently, if you read in here, you probably figure that out. It is an ounce of prevention, which of course is the same argument and advertisement that many people who use brand today use. So, not much difference. Advertisement influences Americans to buy more, but it also does something else. It points out peer pressure in trying to convince Americans that they need certain things. And we're going to take a look at that, specifically in electrical appliances. Okay, your book goes on to talk about some of these appliances by pointing out that number of electrified households grew. This is true. Although even some households in the 1950s and 60s didn't have electrical power. In fact, my grandmother living in Fairhaven on a farm, or near a farm in Fairhaven, didn't have electricity until the mid-1950s in her house. So a lot of people couldn't afford these things yet. And there is, of course, the problem that's associated with buying all of these goods, and that is credit. Okay? In order to get most Americans who are making between $500 and $700 a year to spend a lot of money on different goods and services that they themselves were making in many of the factories, you had to consider, mass producing a lot of these goods. The average factory worker was making 50% more at the end of the decade than it had started. A lot of that was due to the assembly line and new machines that helped make goods. But a lot just comes on credit. A lot of people buying things with $1 down and $1 forever, making it easy to purchase things on installment. Okay? And you could buy goods over an extended period. Enjoy while you pay. It almost seems like, the slogans of having credit cards today, and that is that credit is something you don't need cash for. But if you do not pay it, of course, with interest, you owe a great deal more. And that becomes a problem for many Americans in the 1920s. Okay? This becomes a paradox, okay, for this period, because we know that something does possibly go wrong with the nation's economy. And that is, of course, the stock market crash in 1929. So if so many Americans were making more money, and if the president stands for limited business, like he doesn't want the government involved in business, where did it go so wrong? We'll look at that next.